what I wanted to talk about, when I was coming to India, I spoke with Jayaji, the Acharya for India in Pune, and I said, what would be a nice thing to talk about? And we could turn this light off. These lights are the ones, I think.
Give him a little light.
Maybe one side. Yeah. You can still see me. Step into the light. So I asked him, I said, what would be a nice thing to share? And he said, well, you could share a little bit about your experience with community. And as you know from reading the autobiography, the last chapter, and reading The New Path of Swamiji, community was something that Master talked a lot. He said Swamiji used to say toward the end of Master's time in the body, he would have certain subjects to talk about, and he would start out on that. And he said, about communities. And he would always go back to talking about community. And it was something that he felt very strongly about, something that Swamiji felt very strongly about. And so we'll talk a little bit about that and a little bit of the principles, but so it's not too dry. I've managed to pull a number of photos out of the archives. There's a woman in Ananda village, Lakshmi, who was one of the founding members, and she had some health challenges last year, and she couldn't move. She had a problem with her knee, and so she was staying at home. She said, what can I do to help? And she asked people to send her photographs that they had taken, and then she put them on the computer, she digitized them. And I heard about this, and I spoke to her. I said, do you think you can give me some of the photographs? So she gave me a whole lot of photographs, and then I tried to mash things together, but it's a little bit free form, so we'll see. But we can have the next slide here. This is, of course, Swamiji, our founder. And what inspired me was the way Swamiji worked with people to get them to work together, to get them to come onto the path and to master. And he was a master. He was a genius. He did it in a very subtle way. He wasn't, here are the rules, here's what we're doing, but he just worked with people. And so I've tried to write down some of those things. Some of them lend themselves to illustrations, some of them don't. But we'll talk about some of the principles, and then we'll show some pictures to have fun. And we picked especially pictures of people some of the older founding members who are now serving in India. So if you've met Dhyanaji, Jyotishji, Jaya, Deviji, so we have some pictures from the early years, and we'll point that out. So first thing about community is, this is not our communities. It's not Swami's communities. We're not coming together for any other reason except Babaji and Master have brought this vision. And it's a vision of coming together to practice Kriya Yoga for self-realization. We need to be in tune with them. The other important thing is we need to use our intuition of how that works. And Swamiji always emphasized, he said, the most important thing, be kind to each other, be harmonious, just try to work with people. Again, I want to mention that when we say community, we often think Ananda village, we buy land, we build a big beautiful place like Horoville, Ananda village, or even a city apartment buildings, but that's not community. Community is really people. And it doesn't matter if you have the physical, whether you're living right together, or there's many different forms. You can have a virtual community, online you connect. You can have a community where you come together to a center, you see each other, you support each other. So it's all different stages, and these principles, while they're born at Ananda Village, a piece of land in California in the 1970s and 80s, they apply more universally as Ananda's work spreads. So let's have the next slide. And we want to be clear of what we're doing with community. So the only goal of community really is to create an environment, a support for self-realization. we're not here to make beautiful buildings, we're not here to create beautiful centers, we're not here to give classes to thousands of people, except that they can lead people to self-realization. And then specifically about built environments, Swami emphasized, he said, we're not here to create heaven on earth. The idea of an Ananda village or a more physical community, it's not about what we're creating here, because matter is forever an imperfect medium to manifest the divine, to express it. So we do what we can, we do the best we can, but we're not attached. So many communities, eco-villages, they're so focused on what they're building, what they're there, organic agriculture, or a beautiful dome house, or a architecture, or a temple. But that's not it. It's the people. And you always have to give it back to Master, rely on that energy, and then expect a miracle. That's how Ananda was born. He said, just expect things to happen. Once you're in tune with that, the divine flow will come through. Okay, next slide. So this is Swamiji in the early years. He founded the Ananda community when he was in his 40s. And that's Devi Ji and Jyotish Ji behind him. And he just, he was with Self-Realization Fellowship. He was removed from that organization. He didn't know quite what to do. And he just felt guided. He said, okay, I heard my master talk about communities. I'm going to do this. So he just started. And he took whoever came. Next slide. And of course, one of his most important rules was people are more important than things. Community is about people, as I say again. And he said, don't make too many rules. So you think spiritual teacher, Swamiji, he could come and he could say, okay, I'm the head of Ananda. This is how it's going to be. I was with Master. Here's what we're going to do. And you need to do this, and you need to do this, and you need to do this. He never did it that way. He said, too many rules. Master said, too many rules spoil the spirit. What you have to do is inspire people. You have to set an example. You have to inspire them to come to your vision or to the vision of the masters, but not drive them. And especially with his experiences with Self-Realization Fellowship and the organization, he was very, very wary about an organization taking over the needs of the individual. The whole reason communities exist, why? Self-realization of the individual. If you subvert the individual to the needs of the organization, you lose what we're trying to do. So make sure we always look at the individual. Okay, next. So he bought some land. That's Keshavaji in the middle there. And David Praver, the one without the shirt, David Praver was the center leader in Palo Alto, and still is. He's been to India many times. So Swamiji just said, okay, we'll see what Master gives. And he found this land in the Sierras. And this was the late 60s, early 70s. He just said, okay, whoever comes, I will work with them. Next picture. And here we have, these are some of the young people that came. It was the time, the hippie movement in the United States. Haridas, who lives in the Bangalore center, Bangalore, says it was the era of hair. That's not Haridas, I don't think. But this is Devarshi, Nayaswami Devarshi, who is the head of the monks in Pune. And this was the staff for the garden. So they just were having their lunch out under one of the few structures. And they just came, and Swami said, the most important thing is the spirit. We need to meditate together, we need to work together, and then let's see what we can build. And so we had a garden from the very beginning. These are the gardeners getting together. That's Maria McSweeney in the corner, who's also was a center leader in Sacramento. Next one. And who's in the bottom there? Jayaji. And so Swami, he would take whoever would come. At that point, the community wasn't very, very well defined. He knew it was Master's community, it was Kriya Yoga. But a lot of people didn't really know what that meant. And he was the example of discipleship. And he said, whoever's trying to start the community, they have to put that example. And then look for people who are in tune with that. And so Jayaji was one who came in 1969, And he, Swami saw in him that yes, he understands what I'm doing. And so he would work with Jaya. He didn't work so much with the people that he felt were not in tune. He said, let them come, take what they can. But if they're not in tune with what we're doing, that's fine. They can go. I'm not going to spend my time convincing them. I'm going to work with the people that already resonate with me. Next. So work with the individuals. Committees. Swamiji did not like committees. So lots of communities say we have to come to whole consensus. And everybody has to agree and everybody has to say, and then we sit around and we make these decisions. And Master would make jokes about this too. I don't know if you remember the story about there was a community that they couldn't decide what to have for dessert. There was tapioca and there was rice pudding. And so they had these endless discussions about, no, we should have tapioca, no, we have rice pudding. And he put that out as an example and said, you can waste a lot of time on things that aren't that important. And if it's important that people feel part of it, that they feel heard, but don't get too bogged down in all the details. And the second one, it's better to get energy going. So, I'm an engineer by profession, and we always like to have everything ready, everything exact, and all the drawings ready. But Swamiji wasn't like that. He said, you can get lost in the plans, and you'll never quite figure it out. It's much better to do something, because once you do something, energy is moving. And he said something very interesting. He said, energy has its own intelligence. Once there's a flow of energy, it will attract the resources, it will attract the ideas, it will attract the things you need. This is a principle for Dwapara Yuga. So he would have discussions and get things, but then he would say, okay, enough discussion, let's go do something. Even if it was the wrong thing, and even if he knew it was probably not going to be the right thing, he would say, just go, do something. And that helped bring people together. So next. So here, this is a group planning the community. And Swamiji, again, was empowering individuals. People came, and they were young people, some with some training, some not. He said, this is your community. We have to build it. Go out there and do it. So here's a planning committee. That's Jyotishji in the back there. Right here. This is Anandi, who I think many of you seen on webinars, Anandiji, and Seva, the founding member here, Seva. And here they are starting to think, okay, what are we going to build? This is some of the original master plan map there. Okay, next. And they started building. And this is Ananda Village in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada in California. This was one of the first ones they built. This is Jyotish and Deviji's dome. The one that you've probably heard some of the stories that it burned down in the fire, and Jyotishji said, well, we don't have to worry about leaks anymore. So people were not trained carpenters, people were not trained city planners, and if they sort of waited around for Swamiji to tell them exactly what to do, or the other leaders, it wouldn't have happened. But he just said, okay, let's just go. And we did what we could. They did what they could. I wasn't here during these times. I came early 1990s, so this is all before my time. Next one. So this was some of the early Ananda housing. This is a tree house. And you may have heard some of the jokes about this, but this one at this time, Krishnadas was living in there. Krishnadas is another longtime member. He brings the groups from the Expanding Light, the retreat center. I don't know if some of you met him, maybe not. He's coming again next week, I think, or they're here. They're here now. And some other people got to live in this. This was a high-class housing. Okay, next one. And of course, we heard about teepees. Sadhana Devi ji, Jaya and Sadhana Devi, she had the idea of, hey, summer living is easy, but it rains and it's cold. We need some shelter. So she helped sew these. And I don't know if some of you may have met Duti. She plays the guitar and music. She's been to India. This is her family, that's her son, and this was a teepee they were living in there. So it was just get started and keep the focus on where we're going, not exactly so much where we are. Okay, next. This is Naya Swami Uma, who is from England. She serves in Assisi now. She served in, I don't think she's been to India, but I really like this picture because Swamiji always tuned in to the people that had energy. And he said, it's much more important, your energy, your willingness, your positive thinking, than any particular skills. And, this was one of the few cars, a Volkswagen Beetle. And, here's Uma, who is she was born in, England in a nice, a nice upper class home and taking tea. And, and here she is in Ananda village changing the oil. Okay, next. So what was really important in Swamiji was, we all see each other as different nationalities, as different, man, woman, young, old, teacher, profession. Swami never saw people that way. Swami just saw people as souls who happened to be in a body. And he could just see right through that body. He said, this body is temporary. What's the role you're playing right now? You've played hundreds of thousands of other roles. And he would just look right at the soul. And this way, he would include everyone. He could relate to people of any political persuasion, background, race, religion. And what he saw was that the attitude and the sincerity of people was what really counted. Because it was very easy to think, we're building a community and we need someone who can, who knows how to build. We need someone who knows how to be a printer. We needed someone who knows finances. He never looked at that. It was just like Master. That story in the path where Swamiji brought a man and said, oh, we found a printer. And Master said, first, look at the person. Do they have our spirit? Do they have our attitude? Then we see how they can help. And Swamiji always looked at the individual. So next. And here, this is Jyotishji and Deviji at their wedding. It's an old picture and it's a little pixelated, but originally a lot of the community was more of a single monastics, but Swami felt that it was important for this new age, as I was talking about today, that we embraced all forms of life and all stages of life. And so Jyotish and Deviji were some of the first to get married, as was Jayaji and Sadhana Deviji. They had children. And Swami said, this is important for the community. He said, the community actually grew and started to go better when we had more families, and it wasn't just the monastic energy. And so, next one. He could also, Swami had the amazing ability to have everyone felt that Swami was their best friend. And it didn't matter where they came from, what kind of education. Here, he's with a couple of society ladies from Rome, actually. These are people of a certain, class in Rome, and they were drawn to Swamiji, and they could relate to him, and he could relate to them. And at the same time, he could relate to those characters that were sitting on the couch, in the farm at Ananda village. He could see right through the exterior. Next. And he embraced children. This is Matra Devi, Krishnadas's wife, and her first son, and children started being born in the community. And he said, yeah, children is important. We need to make room. We need to make this work. It's not just about, monastics who can sit in meditation for 5 hours. We need to show people how to live all stages of life, all forms of life. Parenting, we need to spiritualize parenting. And so here, this is Swamiji in some of the early years with the school children. This is Saraswati, one of the teachers. But Swami could be the best friend to children as well. He could relate to them on their level. He could teach them. He could help them, and he helped the teachers to figure out how to do that. It was a very important part of the community of bringing education. He wrote Education for Life. Nitai, did Nitai come here? No, he founded the schools. He was in India last year, I believe. And he took Swamiji's thoughts and started developing how do we teach children? How do we incorporate them? What's appropriate for the spiritual evolution of children? How do you teach them not meditation, but you can teach them to be still, or teach them concentration, or teach them what's age appropriate. And that was a very important part of bringing the community together. So this is a difficult one for community. So community, we have people and we all want to become saints, but we're not quite saints yet. And one of the things that community does is it rubs, the little egos rub up against each other, and sometimes there's friction, and sometimes there's little corners that get chipped off. And so how did Swamiji deal with that? Because a lot of times in community, this can be something that's very, very difficult. And people say, oh, it's only very nice ideals, but then you get into the community and you see, oh, it's not so easy because there's people involved. There was the community manager at Palo Alto said to me once, he said, yeah, community is great, it's beautiful, except there's all these people involved that cause problems. So you have to deal with it. Swamiji, again, was a master at doing this, because what's the tendency of maybe the modern era? It's, okay, let's get people together and work out their conflicts, and my emotions, I need to have my voice, and I need to be heard, and how can we, my truth is this. And it wasn't at all the way Swamiji worked. It was more, we're souls, and at the soul level we're perfect. We're just encased in these egos right now, and these egos have self-identification. I'm this, I'm that, I'm this way, you're that way, especially the you. A lot more than I. It's like, you are causing problems. That's the ego talking. And he just said, no, go beyond that. How do we go beyond that? So one, he never gave advice or critiqued anyone unless he really felt they were open to hearing it. And people would ask him, say, oh, Swamiji, what should I do? How can I do this? He'd ask other people. He was very, very hesitant to give advice unless he felt someone was open to it. And most of the time, we're in our little egos and we're not so open to it. So he said, okay, you just have to keep working, and at some point there'll be an opening, and then I can tell you. He said at times he waited years to tell people something that they needed to hear. Because he said, if I told them now, they would just get mad, they wouldn't listen, they might turn away from the path. There were people who would come, because when you're working together, you can see everybody else's problems, right? You always know what's wrong with the other person, not necessarily what's wrong with you. And so there's some very difficult people. And they would come to Swami and say, Swami, this person's driving me crazy. Can't you just tell them, to behave this way or do this way? And he would just say, okay, well. And one time he said, okay, if they can't work with anybody else, they'll work with me. I bring them on my staff and they work. And then he could work through them that way. So another thing that's very important is if there's some anger or some emotion or some charge, do not have a confrontation when you're charged. What did he say? He said, go meditate, go center, go calm yourself, and then when you're back connected to your center, then you can go talk to the person and work it out. And I found out this one by the hard way, because I'm the village manager, and there's lots of things happen, and people come, and they have various issues. And like I said, we all want to be saints, but we're not quite there yet. And so somebody will come with his emotional charge, and I've made the mistake of what? Meeting that energy with my emotional energy. So they're yelling at me, and I want to yell back at them. It never works. It's terrible. It's really bad. Because in community, you're going to be working and living with people for a long time. We're in this for the long haul. And if you just I gotta tell this person what I think, it creates wounds that last for years, and that's why Swami wouldn't do this. So let them relate on a soul level. And then another thing that was very important that Swami emphasized was that he would listen to anybody. You know, he had probably the greatest intuition and connection with Master, or the leaders have good connection, but he never imposed that. He said, God can speak through anyone. And so he always asked people, so what do you think of this idea? What about this idea? And if people weren't in tune with it, he didn't impose it. And if sometimes, he said, they would say something and go, oh yeah, I hadn't thought about that. It feels like God is speaking through them. So this again, you know, we obviously have to work together. We obviously meet together in community. But again, it's not overemphasizing that. So this is one of the bigger meetings, but we try not to spend too much time meetings. We try to have more doing things. Next one. And this was Swamiji. This is Swamiji's dome, his house at the Crystal Hermitage in the very early years when it was just the dome. And he would invite people over to his house all the time. And sometimes he would read what he had written, he would read the path, chapters, sometimes he would just talk, but he would always ask people for their opinions. And when people didn't give an opinion back or didn't talk, he would get a little bit upset because, you know, he's reading the path and people are going, oh my God, Swamiji, this is amazing, because they didn't know anything about, he hadn't written much, this was the 70s. But when people didn't engage and give him any feedback, he would say, come on, you know, you have to put your energy there too. This is a two-way thing. I can't just keep giving to you. He said, sometimes I used to feel, Swami said this, I used to feel like I was an automatic, like a Vitrola, an old record player. You put in a coin and a talk comes out. And you know, he said, no, it has to be something we build together. And so he would always ask people for their input, young, old, even people who had, you know, spent very little time with the community. He would always be open to listening. So listening, very important. Next. So this is Swamiji with his mother. And the principle here is, you know, where there is adherence to Dharma, that's victory. So one of the things he said is, you really need to be true to your principles. And the reason I put the picture of his mother there is he also had that sense of, you know, he was a renunciate, a spiritual teacher, but he knew, you know, I have an obligation to my parents too, to some extent. Not to the extent maybe that they want me to do things, but he was very respectful of his parents, especially his mother was a very, very spiritual person, and it was just beautiful to see. He treated her with great respect and openness. So the next one, the one I wanted to illustrate this one is you've all probably heard about the wildfire that happened at Ananda Village in 1976. And this was a very good, one of the community's first real grounding in this principle of let's stay true to our principles no matter what happens. So this is at the top of the ridge in Ananda Village, and they're looking down at a fire coming at them. These are all the community residents. The fire is coming up the hill. Next. There it is. This is what they're looking down on. The fire was started by a vehicle of the government that had some problems and started the fire. And unfortunately, they were not able to stop it, so it burned up this hill. California has a very dry climate in the summer. It's a Mediterranean climate. So the fire danger is very high. This is in June, which is early for fires, but the forest burns very well. So once a fire gets started, especially if there's some wind, it's hard to stop. So next. So they have many firefighting techniques. They're dropping chemicals or water mixed with borate to help retard it. Next. But despite the best efforts, most of the Ananda land was burned, including, at the time there were 22 houses, and 20 of them burned down, including that beautiful dome that Jyotish built there. And Jyotish and Devi's son had just been born about a week before the fire, So it was a very, very hard test. This was 1976. So basically 7 years after the community was founded, just getting going, fire wiped out everything. So you can imagine, it's quite a devastating blow. Next. But what happened? So we put out a call to friends, and people responded by donations of clothing, household items, and some monetary donations. And one of the first things this was Jyotishji in connection with Swamiji, they said, there were a number of people who said, well, the community burned down. There's nothing left here. We're leaving because, everything we thought we were building is gone. They were the people who didn't really get it, that the spirit, that the community wasn't the outer, it was the inner, it was the people, it was our life and master together. But a number of people decided to leave. And Jyotishji took the decision, he said, these people are leaving. We need to help them because they're going back out into the world and they don't have the support of the community. On the basis, so the little bit of money that came in and some of the donations, they gave it to the people that were leaving, which was, not necessarily what you would think you would do. Next. And then they just started rebuilding. And we had some help. This is from the Swami Muktananda's organization, 3HO. Some of the gentlemen in turbans came to help build. This is rebuilding one of the domes. And it turned out that the fire was caused by, as I said, by a government vehicle. And in the United States, if someone causes you harm, you can sue them. You can open a lawsuit, and you can try to recuperate some of your losses. So especially if it's a government and they were at fault, you can sue. So we could have sued. We could have brought a lawsuit against the Nevada County government and recuperated some of our losses. And some of our neighbors did that successfully. But Swamiji said, no, our principle, we came to give. Our principle is showing people a different way of life, of being generous. And it was nobody's fault, really, that it happened. It was an accident. And so we are not going to sue. And we are not going to try to give away, which was a very difficult thing because we had no insurance. People didn't have much money. And it was a very slow process to rebuild. People went out to work. They went out to work in the rice fields, 10, 12-hour, 14-hour days to earn money, come back, rebuild the community. But it actually strengthened the community because that adherence to the principles and working together, the core of what the community was about was stronger. The people who felt, it's my nice dome house, it's my nice life in the woods, they left. It's the people who said, no, it's Kriya, it's attunement, it's intuition. We still have all that. We're here. Next. So another very, very important thing that Swami was a master at, that many people founding communities are not so good at, and that is giving responsibility to others. Swami knew, if this is going to grow, I can't do this by myself. And he obviously was the most qualified, he was the most in tune, he had the most training, probably had the best ideas of what should have happened or where we should go. But like I said, he never imposed those, and he immediately started looking for people. I can work with this person, Jyotishi Deviji, Jayaji, other ones. And I'm going to let them take responsibility. Anyone who was willing to take responsibility, who he felt was in tune, he would give responsibility. And what comes with that is people make mistakes. People are not going to have that same attunement that the Acharya, the spiritual director, has. So he just said, it is much more important that they become part of this and take responsibility and make their own mistakes than if I make all the decisions and we have, maybe we get outwardly a little faster. But if this is going to grow, it has to last past my lifetime because I'm just a channel. Next. So here he would have people teaching very, very early on. That's Jayaji with the pigtail and a nice 60s, 70s suit there. And that's, this is Deviji here. And not sure who that is. Next. So he had them out giving classes, out taking, next please. And this is again, this is Sadhana Devi. That's Devi. And this one, Sadhana told me about this, and she said it was pretty funny because this was a class that they were giving at the retreat on marriage and family life. And two of them had a kid that was maybe 1 year old. The other woman didn't even have any children. And they'd only all been married only for about a year or two. But Swami said, no, okay, you're going to go give a class on marriage and family life. So here they are. And Sadhana said, we had no idea what we were doing. But we learned something from doing it. And she said, I don't know if anybody else learned anything, but we learned something. Very nice. This is another instance. This is the first temple dome. Actually, the second one. The first one's the one Swami stapled together and blew down. This one was a big one. Well, actually, no, there was the one that fell down. Then there was another one that was only up for a year, and it burned down on the 1 year anniversary of Ananda on July 4th. And then this was the one built after that, which lasted for a number of years. And then this one fell down in 1992, and now we have another one. This is at the meditation retreat. That's an aside. Anyway, what I wanted to illustrate here was this gentleman here was giving Sunday satsang, and he was a member that came. His Benai, he's still there. He does jewelry. He helps with the astrological bangles and not these, but the gems. Anyway, turns out his general inclination, his general personality is not a public speaker. And Swamiji said, I want to give him a chance. I want him to take some responsibility. So he had him give Sunday service there, or Sunday satsang. And some of the people I talked to after seeing this, and he jokes about it too, he said, it was a very interesting satsang because he would come up and he'd say, I think we need to love God. And then he would be quiet for about 3 or 4 minutes. And then he would have another thought. And they said it was a little painful how this, and he doesn't give a lot of Sunday services. He serves in many different ways. But Swami just said, look, everybody has to get and do this. And you may have heard Daviji tell the story that they were at they had a big outreach in San Francisco, and Swamiji was giving all the talks, and the night before they were there over the weekend, and on Saturday night he came to Daviji and said, hey Davy, I'd like you to give the talk tomorrow. And she's just like, she was 23, 24 years old, hadn't been there very long, and so Swami, how can I possibly give the talk? I can't do that. And he said, no, just get past yourself, get out of yourself, tune into Master, you give the talk. And she said, somehow I made it through it. I don't know how, I don't know what I said, but it worked, and people seemed to be appreciative. So Swami was not afraid to give people responsibility. Next. And of course, this is Jyotish and Daviji, and he tuned into them very early on and started training them very directly. Jyotishji worked with Swami from before the time of Ananda Village, and Daviji came in 1970, 71. Next. So, if you're going to have a community, you got to get people to work together. And how do you get people to work together? Do you just, read them a list of rules? You should be nice. You should work together. You should think of other people's opinions. You should do that. No, you got to get them out there doing it. People figure it out. So, get people going. The other is one of Swamiji's favorite sayings is, many hands make a miracle. And he said, what you can do with a big group, what you can't do with just one or two, you can do with a much bigger group. And Ananda is built on many miracles, many people contributing in many different ways. It always seems like when we need something to happen, the right person comes along. Master sends the right person who can help or can get going. And it's also very, very important, a positive consciousness. This was something that Swamiji just insisted on, and Master as well. You could, with an idea, you could talk about, okay, what if we did it this way, or what if we did it this way? But if it got to the point where people were just saying, oh, this won't work because of this won't work because of this is wrong with this is it. Swamiji would not listen. He would just stop the conversation. And the negativity, negative energy, just pulls that energy down, and it doesn't allow those solutions to come. So both Master and Swamiji were always, we have to be positive. I mean, to the point, sometimes for me it was hard. I mean, Swamiji would be saying these things, I'm going, well, but sir, that's not quite true. I mean, it's like this, and it's like this. And he was on a different plane. He was just, moving towards a higher positive consciousness. And it wasn't an easy lesson for a lot of people, for me especially. Okay, next. So, this is early years of Ananda. That's Sadhguru Devi Ji again, starting to work on, this is a macrame business. So they had a business tying cords into knots that you could hang plants. It's macrame, it's called. And they had to do just whatever. They just made the business as they thought, but it was working together for businesses. And that's what they needed to survive. This is another business. That's Keshavaji from Delhi, and both on the right here and on the left there. This is an oil and incense business that Jyotishji started, and then it was handed off as one of the long-running businesses. But, making essential oils, dipping incense sticks. Some of these businesses actually made a little bit of money. A lot of them were what they called learning experiences. But the important thing was the community was doing things together, and they were bringing some livelihood, bringing some sharing. Next. Of course, we had to build the community. So that's Jayaji on the right there. He did a lot of construction, and that's Arjuna on the left. He comes to India quite regularly from Assisi. I don't know if he's been down this far. I think there are more people down south here. That's Sudarshan. This is them working on the expanding light. And again, this is the retreat building. And Swamiji felt it's time to build the retreat. We didn't have the money. They started on the foundation. They figured out how to do it. And it had to stop for a while. We ran out of money. Then it came back and kept going. Next. So don't be afraid to start things. That's Biraj, who was in India for quite a while in Pune. And this is why we had at one point a store in a nearby town, a health food and grocery store called Earth Song. Another of our businesses. Okay, next. One of the most important things we do is have seva days, or times where we just come together. It's outside of our regular area of service or job, and we just come and serve. This is one at the Expanding Light. There's one in particular that we have called Rajasi Day, which is on Rajasi Janakananda's birthday or thereabouts, the beginning of May. And the whole community comes together and we just serve on projects where we wouldn't really normally serve. You work with people or serve with people you don't normally see. And some useful things get done, but it's more about building the community than getting useful things done, which is a very hard lesson for me as community manager, because I'm always trying to get things done, but it usually makes more work left afterwards of unfinished things than we get done. But it's a beautiful day anyway, so we have another few more pictures. We meditate together during the day. Meditation is very important. Next, we chant and sing. This is a kirtan happening during one of the work days outside. Next. We get everybody involved. This is one of the best workers at Ananda Village here. That's Mark. In his earlier years. I try to include the high school students, just everybody. This is Acharya Dharmadas, who was in India for many years. And, just whatever needed doing, painting, carpentry, raking, just get out there and serve and build the community. Next. So, another very, very fundamental one from Swamiji was, we're not just doing this for ourselves. We are not just creating this community because we want to have a nice little group of Kriya bonds that can support each other. If we want to stay in tune, we have to spread this work. This is Master's work, and one of our primary areas of service is just bringing that teachings out. So we have quite a few pictures of that because Swamiji put a huge emphasis in this. Next, we'll go pretty quick. In the beginning, he started a retreat in the very beginning. Swami used to do everything. Next, he would do all the classes, all the teachings, all the Sunday satsangs, and then he started giving responsibility to others. Next, this is him. This is Swamiji here at the old retreat out under the trees, and he would serve whoever would come, whoever might be interested. Next, this is the women renunciants, the nuns. This is the old kitchen at the first retreat. It's one of the funkier kitchens that I've ever been in. It doesn't exist anymore, and it was held up by the grace of Master. I looked underneath, and the beams that were supposed to be holding it weren't there.
I asked Jay said it was still standing because all the termites were holding hands.
And that's Anandi, that's Asha over there. Anyway, next. So they were just serving. That's Seva, serving food, serving people at the retreat. Next. Gradually he incorporated other people to help in the retreat. Next. And we built a retreat. This is one of the early retreat cabins. Looked a little better next on the inside. You can see the next one. A little better on the inside than the outside, but they're simple. But people came, we served who came. Next. We also sent people out. This is a gathering in Berkeley in the very early 70s. This is Naya Swami Vijay, who is now in Rishikesh, serving there, but especially taking out the music, the teachings, under the banner of unity of religions often. Next. Swamiji, after the fire, instead of focusing back at Ananda village, what did he do? He said, no, now's the time to go out. We have to go to Swamiji, we're rebuilding the community, we have nothing, we're burned down. He said, no, time to go out. So he started something called the Joy Tours. And this is in Texas. He's visiting a group there, singing his songs, teaching. He just went around the whole United States. Next. This is some of the people that went with him. I don't know if we have any. Shivani's there. Yeah, that's Savitri, Krishnadas, down here at the bottom, of course. Next. And then we founded our first community outside. This is Naya Swami Haridas, who now is the center leader in Bangalore. And he was sent to Sacramento, where they rented a house, and they finally called it the garage of all religions. And they started having services and satsang there. Next. We built another retreat, the Expanding Light Retreat. So that's Arjuna and Swamiji. Next. We had a groundbreaking again. We started the project because it was the time, not because we had the money or we had nothing else to do. We started, again, as the community was being rebuilt. It was 1978, 79. Next. And here's Swami at the groundbreaking. One of many groundbreaking he's done in his day. Next. Then he said, okay, Europe. I grew up in Italy, or I grew up in Europe, and I feel like Master needs to reach there. So that's Naya Swami Dhyana. Was one of the first people along with Daviji that went with him to Italy. Next. And here you see that's Devi, Dhyana, and Leela, who are singing there, and then another member on the right. Next. There they are. That's Daviji. And Leela was Swami's housekeeper, cook, took care of him for many, many years. Next. They, just took the teachings all around Italy. He took the oratorios, music out. They sang for the Pope. And that's him blessing us here. Next. Right, next one. Dhyanaji, we had some letters from devotees or potential devotees in Africa. And Swami said, yeah, why don't you go? We'll probably never get back there. We'll probably never be able to stay. But, she went and visited in Africa, and they did a Kriya initiation. There's still some people there who are connected. Next. So another principle of Swamiji's was an emphasis on beauty and on upliftment of consciousness in any way possible. So it wasn't just nice teachings and then our daily life is sort of over here. He said he wanted to bring that sense of upliftment of consciousness into everything. So into the buildings we built, the gardens, especially his music. He said, if you want to know me, listen to my music. And everything he would do would have music as part of it. He would sing, the choir would sing, play music, bring people together. It was very, very important. The visual arts, paintings and fine arts, he really encouraged people to express a new consciousness, not just to do art for the sake of being different or trying to be unique, which usually meant it was coming from some ego, but to do something that expresses a higher consciousness, and the theater as well. So that has been a major part of Ananda for a long time. Next. So this is Swamiji performing some music. That backdrop, I think, was used for one of the plays, The Jewel and the Lotus, that he wrote. And he was just trying to share with people in a non-intellectual way. He was trying to reach them at the heart level. Next. He would play. This is Kalyani, had a beautiful voice. She was quite a difficult personality, but Swami just saw this beauty in her and worked with her, and they did some concerts together. Next. This was after a play. I think, again, The Jewel and the Lotus. Swamiji's coming up on stage. There's some of the actors there on the left. Next. And of course, then, many of you have seen the Crystal Hermitage. Master in Encinitas created, Rajasi gifted him this house, and then he created a place of gardens, of a temple on a bluff overlooking the Pacific, a place where people who weren't necessarily in tune with our teachings could come and just feel the vibration and be uplifted. And Swamiji did something similar at the Crystal Hermitage. So next, he actually received some money from his father, his inheritance, and his father was always berating him and said, you're always giving all your money to Ananda. You can't do that. You have to keep something. You have to, think of your own security in the future. So Swamiji felt that it wouldn't be right to give his inheritance to Ananda, like he usually gave everything to Ananda. But what he did say is, well, I'll use it and I'll build my house. But he really wasn't building a house for him. He was really building something for the community. And he was building this garden where people could come and just be uplifted. So next, this is where the tulips are planted. And this is the back side of the house. And it's a very, very beautiful space. We open it up now. We planted this year 13,000 tulips. And during the month of April, many, many people come from all over, just the local area, but from as far away as San Francisco, 3 or 4 hours they're driving. And they don't really know much about it. They're not Kriya Yogis. They're not that interested in the teachings, but they feel something there. They feel upliftment. They feel beauty. You can turn to the next one. They feel like, even inside the house. And they say, oh, I don't know what these people are doing, but it feels nice here. And those that the spark ignites something come, but most of it is just, oh, that was a nice place. But it's done a wonderful thing for our relationships with our neighbors, because now they say, oh, these people aren't just hippies out in the woods. They created something nice. I can relate to this. Next. And lastly, Swami was always interested in just having fun. Somebody asked him once, what's the purpose of Ananda? He said, oh, to have fun. Now, he probably not meant that and just, run around, but it was have fun in a sense of, keep that sense of joy and keep it light. Don't take yourselves too seriously, because so many spiritual organizations can be just, I'm going to think for all don't bother me. That was not Swamiji's way. Swamiji was very personable. You can get the next picture there. And they did all kinds of things. In the early years, this was in early 1970s, they said, let's have an India fair. And so in the middle of...
Follow the elephants.
They actually did have some elephants there. They got them from a casino in Reno. They brought the elephants, and they had fortune tellers and Indian food, and they dressed up as, our version of what Indians dress like. But it was, just to have fun. Next. We would celebrate, have celebrations. Swami, this is Swami's birthday, and, Swami wasn't all that interested in having his birthday celebrated, and, because I'm the spiritual leader, but he knew it was a way to bring people together, and it was something that wasn't necessarily, a spiritual, overtly spiritual, and the whole community could come and hear the little girls were giving him flowers, and he put up with this for many, 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 many years. And it was a very special time for us, for the community. Just celebrate together. Next. We also bring the children together. This is a children's choir where they have older children playing the violin. This is Tim Kretzman playing the dulcimer that he made, harmonium, choir director. So just involve people in it. Next. And we had a Shivaratri, or the American version of Shivaratri. And especially, again, a lot of the children really enjoyed it. Oh, we get to stay up all night and hear stories, and we dress up, and Shiva comes and gives us a boon. It was just, it isn't something directly that Master talked about. It isn't something that's even, I don't even know, I have no idea how true to the tradition of Shivaratri in India it is, but it's Ananda Shivaratri, or Ananda village. Okay, next. On a more secular side, this is in Christmas time, we would have a group of singers who would dress up in Victorian costumes. So we lived near a town called Nevada City that had a mining era heritage. So there was a lot of Victorian houses, and Victorian meaning the English era of the late 19th century. So somebody decided, I don't know who, so we could share our vibration just by singing Christmas songs. Some of them were Swamiji's songs, but some of them were just the traditional songs. So they dress up in these costumes and go to fairs and sing, and they did a creche scene, a depiction of the birth of Jesus. And it was just, be out and celebrate. That's Nirmalaji on the left there. Next. And then we got to the really silly sometimes too. So this is three, I think they're actually, I think they're sisters actually. And they call themselves the Anandru sisters. Yeah, they were spoofing another popular singing group, and they would take some of those songs and put like Ananda lyrics with them, and they came back a number of years in a row. It was quite a popular act here, but it was just completely silly. Next. And now that is the mayor of Ananda Village. That's Jayaji. So this is the 4th of July. It's a celebration of American independence. And again, we celebrated it in our way. And so we had the mayor, the village manager get on a horse. I've never gotten on a horse yet. So next. And then we have little theatrical skits. And this one was a skit called Karma Smoke. Like there was a popular Western called Gunsmoke. But this was Karma Smoke, and it was the director called it an Eastern Western. So it was, putting various jokes in there about the spiritual path, and like it was a Western, and just having fun. Next, and this is Halloween. That's Keshavaji there, dressed up. Next, and Swami was he had a beautiful sense of humor. He would just tell jokes, and we would laugh, and sometimes the next one, he would, next slide, sometimes he would just read P.G. Wodehouse to us. He'd invite us all to the Crystal Hermitage, and P.G. Wodehouse is a British humorist, and quite an interesting sense of humor. I don't know if you've gotten into a little bit here.
It's very popular.
Very popular, so. But he would just invite us over, and he'd do all the different voices, and he'd laugh as hard as anybody. He'd be reading along, and he'd just break out laughing. Next. So, again, it's just, don't take it too seriously. Keep that center of joy. So that's it. I've actually almost managed to finish. But again, the important thing is it's not just about Ananda Village in the 70s. The way that Swami worked with people is the way Ananda is growing in whatever form. If the community is a virtual community, if the community is you come together at a center for satsangs, and whatever it evolves into, but it's about the people, and these principles can help us all come together in the way for community.
Thank you.